December 6th, 1394. On a Sunday night in London, sometime between 8 and 9 o'clock, a Yorkshire man named John Birdby is wandering through the city. The streets off Cheapside are dark, and in such darkness, he spots someone who seems to be in a woman's dress and propositions them. After agreeing on a price, they duck into Soper's Lane and take their pleasure in the shadows. Unfortunately, the darkness was chased away by the city officials, and what follows next is one of the most extraordinary documents to survive from medieval England. One that details cross-dressing, sex work, sodomy, in a confession that becomes more staggering with every additional word. Now, historians still can't agree on what the document is, whether a real arrest or political propaganda, or perhaps both. I'm your host, Jonathan, and today on the Medieval Crime Podcast, the case of Eleanor Reichner. So here's what the plea and memoranda roll of the City of London tells us. Birdby and his companion are placed before the mayor, John Fresh, and the alderman of London. The companion turns out to be a man, but dressed as a woman, and calling himself Eleanor. His actual legal name, however, is John Reichner. Birdby tells the court that he thought Eleanor was a woman, and under that assumption propositioned her in Cheapside, agreed to a price, and of course was caught in the act. Reichner, questioned separately, confirms the encounter, but keeps talking. Proceeded to confess to a whole laundry list of events and actions. A list which include that he was first dressed in women's clothes by an embroiderer named Elizabeth Broodrare, that a sex worker named Anna taught him how to have sex, and I quote, in the manner of a woman, and Philip, rector of Thaydon Garnon, slept with him, and from whom Reichner stole 2 gowns. Furthermore, he spent 5 weeks in Oxford, dressed as Eleanor, working as an embroideress and having sex with 3 scholars in holy orders. He also spent 6 weeks at the Swan Inn at Burford, working as a barmaid, having sex with 2 Franciscan fairs, a Carmelite, and 6 foreign men, and also noted the precise prices of 12 pence, 20 pence, 2 shillings. He admits as well to sex with nuns, with married women, with a girl named Joan in Beaconsfield, and with chaplains in the lanes behind the Tower of London. It is, as historian Jeremy Goldberg puts it, a remarkable narrative. And then the document just stops. There's no verdict, no sentence, no apparent further mention of Reichner ever again. Aside from the pure and utter shock factor of it all, the case is quite intriguing because it is legally bizarre. As in 1395, England had no statutory offense of buggery. That wouldn't arrive until Henry VIII's Parliament passed the Buggery Act in 1533, which, as Paul Johnson has shown, transferred jurisdiction over sodomy from the ecclesiastical courts to the secular criminal courts, and made it a felony punishable by death. But in 1394, sodomy was a sin, a matter for the church courts, not the mayor's court of London. So what exactly was Reichner charged with? The document calls the act that detestable, unmentionable, and ignominious vice. But it doesn't formally charge him with anything. Carus and Boyd, in their significant 1996 article, Ut cum mulier, points out that the Mayor's Court of London had no clear jurisdiction over sodomy at all, and while it is true that prostitution within the city walls was illegal, the courts generally went after the pimps and procuresses, not the sex workers themselves, and most of Reichner's alleged offenses happened in Oxford, Burford, and Beaconsfield, document at face value as a legal record. For them, the case reveals how medieval law struggled with someone like Reichner. because he didn't fit into legal categories, not a meretrix, a Latin word for whore which was tied to femininity, nor easily classified as a sodomite, because he had sex as a man with women too. Carson Boyd argue, drawing on Judith Butler, that Reichner's case shows medieval gender as performative, constructed by acts, clothes, occupation, even the position one took during sex. Reichner cross-dressed, embroidered, and was sexually passive, performing femininity. And that, they argue, is precisely what most disturbed his interrogators, because it wasn't the sodomy itself, but the underlying gender transgression. The reading was brilliant and very influential. But in 2014, Jeremy Goldberg asked, what if the case isn't real at all? Goldberg posits that many things just don't add up. The case is positioned oddly on the membrane, taking up a whole page with just one other unrelated case. And there's, as mentioned, no charge, no verdict, with the court appearing to record crimes outside its jurisdiction in lavish detail, and the clerk includes information that no court would usually want. And then there are the names. Reichner comes from the Middle English reknin, to count money, to recount a tale. A perfect name for a prostitute who tells stories. Goldberg goes further. He notes that Reich sounds like Rick, which is a diminutive of Richard, as in Richard II. Well, here's the political context. In 1392, Richard II had stripped London of its liberties, imprisoned the mayor, and forced the city to pay a £10,000 fine. The Reichner document was entered the day after Londoners paid Richard a further loan of 10,000 marks under duress. Goldberg argues that the Reichner case is, in effect, samizdat, an angry satirical fiction written by London's clerks, mocking Richard II as effeminate, sodomitical, and ungovernable. To further support Goldberg's theory, the proposed delusions of the characters are as follows. The deceased Anna the Whore alludes to the recently dead Queen Anne, Eleanor to Eleanor de Bohun, Beaufort to Richard's favorite dispenser, Oxford to his late favorite Robert de Vere, and the central image of a man in a dress bent over a stall in Cheapside and being penetrated is a vulgar parody of the 1392 reconciliation ceremony, where Richard had been welcomed into London on Cheapside as a bridegroom. If Goldberg is right, then this is something much bigger than a trial record. So which is it? An enigmatic, real court case, or a political jab? This confusion is what makes the case that much more compelling, as it might be both. The document plainly draws on real London street life. There was an Elizabeth Moring, tried in 1385 for running a prostitution ring disguised as an embroidery business, which was almost certainly the Elizabeth Bruderer Reichner names. There was also a real John Reichner, and the legal vocabulary of the document is authentic, with the clerks knowing clearly what a real plea looked like. But whether or not Eleanor Reichner walked in the mayor's court on that December night, the document grants insight into how late medieval Londoners thought about sex, gender, law, and power. It reveals that gender was understood as performance through dress, work, and even sexual position, and that the law could not quite reach certain kinds of bodies, and sodomy could be deployed as a political weapon, a way of accusing a king of being unfit to rule. The criminal offense of buggery in English law wouldn't be created for another 138 years, as highlighted by Paul Johnson. It wouldn't be abolished until 2003, and it wasn't until 2017 that Parliament finally pardoned the men convicted under it. But Eleanor Reichner, whether real, fiction, or a bit of both, was in 1394 already slipping between every category the law back then could devise, and despite being caught in the act, was never charged, sentenced, nor seen again. Until next time on the Medieval Crime Podcast.